The Hobbit was a disappointment to say the least. While I can see some artistry and some glimmers of craft there, most of the time I choose to think of it like a weird fever dream. It has some great moments, don't get me wrong, but most of it doesn't even compare to Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson, the creator of both trilogies, had a stressful, daunting, and very taxing production for both of them. But the difference was, Lord of the Rings had years of preparation. The Hobbit, not so much. And a lot of that doesn't even come down to Peter Jackson. Actually, Peter Jackson kind of stepped in as the hero. He saved thousands of people from losing their jobs and being unemployed because Guillermo del Toro just left. But still, he was unprepared for that massive task at hand, and it's something that's really well documented.
It requires you to have your stuff together, you cannot just, there's no winging it there.
You're winging it. You've got nothing to go on, no storyboards, no previs. You've got these massively complicated scenes and you're just making it up there and then on the spot.
The moment that Guillermo del Toro left this project and it went into Peter Jackson's hands, it was in disarray. But in a world where del Toro stayed, what would things look like? And would it have been anywhere close to the trilogy we got? It's something that I've wondered for years. But here's the information we have on what Guillermo del Toro's Hobbit would look like. The first massive change we would have had is casting. Now, del Toro actually praised Ian Holm in the Lord of the Rings movies and actually wanted him to continue on with the role of Bilbo. I don't know if that would have been digitally de-aging, but eventually Ian Holm would decline, mainly due to his age. The main person looked at, other than Martin Freeman, was James McAvoy. And let's be honest, I think he'd work here. Although Martin Freeman is by far the best part of this trilogy, I think James McAvoy, especially at this age, would have been wonderful here. Next up, we have Ron Perlman, who is a long collaborator of del Toro's. Del Toro went to him and said, "I like you for Thorin, but which do you connect with most?" He briefly considered voicing Smaug, which definitely would have worked, but he eventually figured out he'd really like to play Beorn, which again does work. Brian Blessed was considered for Thorin Oakenshield, who is far older than the choice we got, but kind of more in line with the books. Ian McShane was cast as Balin, which I think works beautifully, and then Doug Jones, another collaborator of del Toro's, was cast as Thandril, and was even slated to wear prosthetics and be the Goblin King. Although these castings were never confirmed, I can really see a different tone being formed, especially with James McAvoy at the helm. Now, it's quoted that del Toro definitely wanted to double down on the storybook, fairytale aspect because it's a children's book, but he didn't want to diverge from his familiar style that he'd built up. He wanted to be similar to Pan's Labyrinth and have the film start lighter, but eventually go into those darker tones. Now, you can definitely see this in his concept art, which is definitely a step away from Jackson's trilogy and has a little bit of that del Toro fingerprint on it, like Smaug. While it was a very strong part of the Jackson trilogy and was a great design, del Toro envisioned something even crazier. It lent away from the traditional dragon design and just was large and creepy. He wanted the eyes to be difficult to locate, hidden with the enormous horned head to add tension to the moments with Bilbo sneaking around. Additions like this are just interesting. And of course, the most controversial decision of any of The Hobbit is dividing the film into 3, something that Jackson changed after the release of the first movie. Of course, that means more screen time, and that doesn't necessarily mean it would be overbloated, but in this case, it's the worst example in all of Hollywood. Legolas, so much filler, adding characters, it just doesn't need to be 3. The 2 movies, however, that del Toro envisioned might have fixed a lot of the pacing and would allowed for a more functional story. Del Toro really wanted to explore Bilbo's story in a real character-driven story, and eventually in the second film lean off into Gandalf's adventures and things off to the side. He wanted Bilbo to have an arc of someone going to war, start off fresh, more childlike, and then realize the horrors of the world, definitely playing in the history of J.R.R. himself. Tolkien was a real-life war veteran, and he wanted to reflect that and really play into those themes. The biggest change would have been the 5 armies. Now, it's been stated that Tolkien hated war and hated how it was glorified in film. Del Toro actually wanted to follow the books more closely, having Bilbo knocked out in the battle and only having the events retold to him. Now, I understand this isn't the most cinematic thing, but I like the idea of the character driving the story, those themes. He was thinking about an overall picture here. The worst part about The Hobbit in my mind that we got is it feels like there's something really, really great there. It's just held down by so much. So many things that could be trimmed down, so many things that could be shortened, things that just needed a little bit more time. For better or worse, del Toro wanted to bring those themes from Tolkien's life to follow the book a lot closer. He wanted to focus on Bilbo and how he changed from character moments and not really the battles itself. It's something we will never see and something I just am so interested in. All I want to do is sit down and have a conversation with del Toro, similar to the unmade version of Dune or The Death of Superman Lives. I think someone needs to dive into this deep and really get to the heart of what could have been. So do you think Del Toro really would have changed this story? Do you think all that pre-production and that planning would have actually given us something a lot more watchable? Let me know in the comments below. As always though, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.